Hello, friends. I know that you don't know this, but what we see here as we get ready to do something like this is a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I just can't help but to think like being on a TV stage, 5, 4. I just want to shout it out for whatever reason. So it makes me feel like we're performing and we're not. We just want to have a conversation with you today. So I've got to get myself out of that. And I just brought you completely authentically into that conversation. My name is Brian Phipps, and I am part of the Disciples Made team, and I get the privilege every month of hanging out with these people. Jason Phelps, one of our coaches, and we're going to have some other things to say about him. Craig Watson, and Myra. They're all coaches. They're all seasoned leaders. They're fully alive people through Jesus, and I'm excited to be with them today. Do y'all want to say like a Merry Christmas thing before we dig in? Like, what are you thinking? What are you feeling?
We're going to answer no to that? Is that
You can answer no.
Merry Christmas.
It's fun. It's fun.
Merry Christmas. I had the pleasure early this morning of an Advent devotion with 4 other women, and we read from Isaiah 11 and then asked, what's the impression God's making on you? And it was, He's coming back. So as you prepare for Christmas, just remember He's coming back.
He's coming back.
Absolutely.
That's helpful to remember.
I mean, absolutely. Merry Christmas. Maybe even more appropriate is Happy Advent as we prepare for that coming. And, I think my hope for not just you guys, but also just for my family, that Christmas can easily be a time where there is no joy, at times maybe no hope, no peace, because we get caught up in just what our society and culture has created this season to be. And I know I just bring that up in particular because my family, like we are fighting extra hard in the best way possible to make sure that we're oriented around the hope, love, joy, and peace of Christmas and the incarnation, and doing our best to not get caught up in the things that steal the peace and joy of this time of year. So that's my hope for us, for my own family, and for everybody who's a part of our Disciples Made and Fully Alive community, and everybody listening on the call.
I love it. Jason, do y'all do the Advent candles? And that's the reason for the 4. And Myra, do y'all do that as well?
Yes.
We grew up doing that. Craig, does the Cross Church down in Texas do that as well?
They do. They haven't always, but I grew up going to a Methodist church, and that was very much a part of what we did. Right.
Yeah. I remember writing like 4 things like for Advent. So it was a little bit different every year, cycle through. I certainly think that it's an advantage to have. You're welcome. You are welcome for that. Now, it's my hope that today, as we kind of talk, we do help set you up, tee you up, whatever strategy you use, the Advent wreath or whatever it is, to allow this to be a season that gives to you way more than takes away. Normally, this is hosted by Jason. I just invited Jason to not worry about this year. I'll take this. And part of that reason is I just want to honor him. If you don't know this, Jason's about to come on staff with Disciples Made half-time in January.
Yes, sir.
Which is very, very exciting for all of us. Very, very exciting. So just wanted to give him time. He's doing an awful lot to prepare for that. I imagine some of that might come up in our conversation today. So I'll just let him unpack that as he will. But I know he's got a million things going on to try to prepare for that. I was like, let me just take one of these things off of you. And just kind of as a reminder, why do we have this webinar? Why do we spend, the time and the energy once a month to just saddle up and go through this? We unpack our monthly focus. You can actually hashtag search that in the Fully Alive app and see all the monthly focus elements. over the years. But basically, what we try to do every month throughout a given year is cycle through all the key values and ideas of the fully alive life as fully alive disciple makers. What are the things that need to be repeated over and over and over again and come at in a kind of a creative redundancy way so that the main thing stays the main thing for all of us? That's why we do this. We encourage and are be excited about your engagement with comments, catch us online or catch us afterwards with that and just engage around these things. And December's is obedience is greater than competence. And I don't know if there's a more core value of all of our values than obedience is greater than competence. Two questions only today, a little bit more brief as we try to pare back this December. Question one for everybody: what does obedience is greater than competence mean to you? And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how important of a value is it to you? That's question one. I know it's got little two elements, but what does it mean to you? Obedience is greater than competence. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how important of a value is that to you? Myra, can we start with you?
Sure. What it means to me that obedience is greater than competence is that I need to shift my focus from can I do it to if God asks me to do it, I need to do it. I will do it. So it's that shift from me focus to him focus, and I just follow through on what he's asking. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would say this is a big shift for me in my life of following Jesus, because probably 15 years ago, it would have ranked about maybe a 3. And now it's right up there at, it's probably not 10 just because I'm not capable of 10. but in the 8-9 range of, this is one of the most important things that I need to remember each and every day. Because he always wants what's best for me, and he would never ask anything of me that wasn't in my best interest. So I'm saying no to his best when I refuse to obey and fall back on my own insecurities and sense of incompetence.
There's a lot of really healthy and helpful flesh that you just added to the bone. If the bone is obedience is greater than competence, you just really helped us gather some insights. And if I was to summarize it, it was, if he's asking me to do it, it's going to get done. Instead of, if he's asked me to do it, can I or can I not? And then I'll make a decision. That's such a major shift. And you don't want to miss out on his best.
Right.
That's huge. Thank you. Craig, what do you have to add there?
Well, like I've mentioned in some past times when we've got together. I mean, at one point I was the best answer I knew to all my problems, right? And so competence was so important. If I wasn't competent enough to handle the problem that was in front of me, then it wasn't going to get solved, and I was going to suffer. My family was going to suffer. My coworkers or employees, whatever. I mean, there was going to be suffering involved if I didn't have the right answer. And through my walk with Jesus, and specifically this particular component, this value of obedience is greater than competence, has been so liberating, so freeing, to realize that I don't have to concentrate on having the answers to all these things. I don't need to have. In fact, I won't. But to just relieve myself of that responsibility and to put that on God, to say that you're the one with the answers, you're the one with the plan, you're the one with the infinite perspective. I'm very limited, so I'm just going to listen to you. I'm going to seek you. I'm going to hear whatever it is that you respond with, and I'm going to just radically obey whatever that is. And it has been, as far as I'm concerned, it's like right at the top of the values. And it is not a, I have found it anyway, not to be a burden, but something that is just absolutely freeing.
Mm, mm. The the one thing you added to Myra that stands out to me is you just raised your capacity. I mean, it was implicit in what Myra said, but you just said it. It frees me to become way more than I thought I could be,
Mm-hmm.
because he imagines things way further than I do. I've definitely noticed that as well. That's big. And another idea that came up as you were talking, Craig, is we're not relinquishing responsibility. You're just not owning it, like as if you are the limit of that capacity. And so I love that. Like, we're not saying don't think or don't bring your competencies or don't continue to improve. Like, I continue to improve. We all continue to improve in every area of life. We're not saying obedience or competence. We're just saying obedience is greater than
Right.
competence. Jason, what does obedience greater than competence mean to you? And on a scale of 1 to 10, where is it?
Yeah, there's one word, and Craig alluded to it. I think it's got to be freedom.
Mm.
Freedom from being in control, freedom from being self-sufficient, of pulling myself up by my own bootstraps, of the pressures of life, and honestly, it's just freedom to not have it all together either, to know all the answers. Because I think for any of us who take growth and our influence and responsibilities seriously, like, there's pressure. There's a lot of pressure to perform. I mean, all these kind of things, right? And all of us experience that in some way, shape, or form. But just that statement that obedience is greater than competence, there's an aspect of surrender in that. A declaration that Jesus is Lord, a declaration that God is in control, so I don't have to be. Oh, and I'm just freed to just stay in step with the Spirit, to know that Jesus has it all figured out. So then I can proceed with love and joy and peace and hope and offer the best of myself without that self-preserving pressure to prove myself. And so, yeah, so freedom is just that. And I mean, Myra, when you had said it, like, we can trust Jesus because, right? I mean, honestly, like, and just
He's
keeping
good.
that unbelief in check is that God is good. And that he's not evil, right? I mean, he has my best interest in mind. So anything that Jesus wants to do in me, through me, beyond me is going to be well worth it. And any time that I start to get out of sync with that is the opportunity to surrender, the opportunity to choose to be content with where I'm at, and to stop fighting. And so, anyhow, if I had to rate this on a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, this is absolutely paramount.
Yeah.
So I got to say 10 out of 10, or I could say bump it up to 11, if I can, refer to Spinal Tap.
Spinal
in that.
Tap. I was like,
Right?
I'll go to 11.
Brian, I figured you would.
Oh, yeah.
You're a fan of Spinal Tap. Just
Come on,
knowing
Spicoli,
you.
let's go. Is it Spicoli? I can't even remember.
Yeah.
Maybe that's another movie.
I think you're thinking of like Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah,
right.
that's Spicoli. I didn't care for that movie. I didn't even finish that movie. But Spinal Tap, I had to watch. That was hilarious.
And boy, I think with that is because that's just one of the things that I appreciate so much about God leading me here, into this ministry and organization, because it really does, I think, sets us apart. Just as it's a distinctive of Disciples Made, is that obedience is greater than competency portion of that. And so, so I got to go 11 out of 10 on this one.
I love it. Well, in fact, Disciples Made wouldn't exist if that principle wasn't being followed. Like, I couldn't have seen any of this on my radar. I wouldn't have made it up because I'd have been afraid to try it. So it's a big part. This is why I love being with you people. You bring such great wisdom to this. You encourage me. Amaya, you look like you're about to say something.
I want to add to what Jason was saying about freedom. It's a freedom from perfectionism, because I'm not responsible, as Craig said. But it's also a freedom to fail.
Mm,
And
good.
we don't have to worry about, because I'm a fear of failure kind of person, and the freedom to fail because Jesus will redeem it, because he's got he's got it, all of those things. To me, that is probably one of the greatest freedoms involved in that.
I love it. I'm clicking around because just this morning I posted on Facebook one of the passages I journaled, and it's from Romans 8. It says, "The spirit you receive does not make you slaves." Keep talking about freedom,
Yeah.
so that you might live in fear again. Rather, the spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship, part of the family. And Jason, you and Myra have described it beautifully, and Craig. Just there's a freedom we get to walk in now. We're not afraid. We're not slaves. We're not wondering if we're going to be, you know,
Right.
popped on top of the head or anything for misbehavior. It's an invitation into a better life. Okay, so one of the reasons that I picked obedience is greater than competence for the monthly focus this December is because if we were to interview Jesus and say, okay, Jesus, where is one of your most powerful application stories? When did you choose obedience over competence in your life? There would be two biggies. There's a bunch of them, but one of the biggies would be Christmas and the incarnation, the choice to leave the power, the majesty, the authority, the preeminence of heaven and become the epitome of vulnerable. Like, stripped yourself of competence. And in Philippians 2, which is a passage we quoted in the Fully Alive, like monthly focus newsletter-ish thing, quoted Philippians 2, where it says he really did strip of himself of all of his attributes as God, omnipresence, omnipotence, all these other things, to become vulnerable. So let's take in the spirit of Jesus, saying, well, that's one of my application stories. I chose to leave that to become this. What would you say is your most powerful application story, or a time you applied this value to life to date? What's the most powerful to date? And what kind of an impact has that made on your life? Whoever's ready. Okay, Craig.
I was thinking dead air. That's not a good
Yeah.
thing.
Nope. I'll let some
I was
of it
just
go.
letting the uncomfortable silence sit there and see what happened.
In a small group, I'd let that go. I'll stay dead silent forever. Been on a podcast. Let's get this thing going.
Yeah, for me, gosh, and you sent those questions out yesterday, so we've had some time to kind of reflect on that, and honestly, it is so hard to just point to a single one of
Mhm.
what I consider a
It's
series
fair.
of obediences that has led me to where I am, not only in my place in life, but in my relationship with Jesus. So, I landed on, and I say that because I haven't quite landed, but I'm going to land right now on what I would consider the very first of those. And being obedient to Jesus. I mean, you've got this general call of obedience in the scriptures. We can, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ, right? If you love me, you'll obey me. And I mean, so there's certainly things that we can look to in scripture, and nobody would argue with those necessarily. I mean, they're in scripture. He says for us to obey him. And we're not going to argue with things that just seem right, like show up to work on time, right? That makes sense to the world. Save money. I mean, those practical just things that we may do out of obedience, like work as unto the Lord. That just it makes sense. But a lot of times, at least in my experience, when we're not talking about that obedience to God's word or that general kind of obedience, there's this God, I feel like you have put some instructions on my heart to follow, and I don't know where they're leading. All I can do is follow what I see as the step that you've put before me, and
Mm,
and just try to be obedient to that.
mm.
And like I said earlier, kind of, I landed on that mantra a while back, and way back actually, where, I'm just going to seek you. I'm going to try to hear what it is that you're giving me, and I'm going to do my best to be radically obedient to that. And the very first one of those things that I can point to is my wife and I were called to. We were pursuing a career path that was joint, where we were going to have a home health agency. We had this plans of making a ton of money and just living life well, and Jesus stepped right in the middle of that plan and directed us in a different way. And it wasn't just me; it was my wife and I together that he did that. But he called her to stay at home with our kids, and he called me in a completely new direction as far as the work that I did. In fact, into construction. Well, she stepped out of a lucrative career, wasn't making any money, and I was stepping into a career where I had no clients. So all of a sudden, we needed to radically not just obey, but radically reduce our lifestyle. So we sold our house. We actually bought, and I've mentioned this, we bought a single wide mobile home, and we moved it in from out in the county, and we moved it into a local mobile home community. And I think I remember I paid $1,000 for it. I think it was worth about 500. I had to put a lot of work into it just to make it livable so we could move into it. But we reduced our monthly needs for income from way up here. We've got 5 kids, that we're supported to way down here. And our life looked a lot different. And what we considered that wasn't our plan. That wasn't something that we wanted or chose to do, but we felt like that God was putting on that plan on our hearts to be obedient to. And he didn't unroll even that whole thing. That came in part and parcel and in steps and the next thing you know, we're way down the road, and it looks like to the rest of the world that we're just crazy. That Craig and Laura, they have walked off the deep end, and I don't even know how to reply to that. And I mentioned that one because that was that first step into just radical obedience was the hardest for me. There's been many since then, but that was the one that gave me a taste of what that really looks like. And it was controversial in our lives, but also in our friend circles, that didn't make sense to them, and it didn't make sense and wouldn't have made sense to us even 6 months prior to that decision. But that definitely has led to it's just led to where we are now, and I am so thankful for that. Our relationship with each other, that experience that has enriched our lives so much, enriched our faith, and just brought on so much stuff I can't even talk about it here. But
yeah, the results of that are have apparently made up for whatever perceived loss there was.
Oh, absolutely.
Early on.
It's kind of like working out. I mean, if your body could speak to you develop this plan for losing weight and getting in better shape, and so you set your body in motion to work out, to eat better. You're reducing the number of calories that you're eating, and probably your food choices. Your body, if it could speak, say, "What are we doing? This is dumb. This doesn't feel good. This can't be the right thing."
I like that sugar thing.
Yeah. I mean, the body would say this walk or this run or this exercise, it feels terrible. This must be failure, right? This is not what success feels like. But the culmination of all of that leads to something, leads just to a different place and a healthier place. And so I kind of see that, at any one point, even me looking at just a snapshot in time during that period of time would have looked like failure even to me if I just wasn't so desperately trying to just do what he wanted.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I'm always refreshed by that story, and just love y'all's radical obedience, as you said. Myra, let's turn the microphone to you. What application story in your life stands out above the rest, and how has that changed your experience?
I would say that it probably goes back to Disciples Made, and I had been connected with you and taking some of the Disciples Made experiences to my church, and doing that, which was something that I felt was important and life-giving to me, to our congregation. And then you came and asked me if I would serve on the board as Women's Catalyst. And I have zero experience that I would consider worthy of service on the board of an organization, a nonprofit like Disciples Made. Didn't know what I could possibly bring to it that would be of value. And but I had that sense of calling, and I knew that you wouldn't ask if you hadn't vetted it with the Lord first. And so I took that step of obedience and said yes. And I'm sure I made clear to you my reservations on
Oh yeah.
whether or not you were making a good decision in this. and, and it took 2 or 3 board meetings and probably a year before I went, oh, I may not have anything to contribute, but God's going to contribute something through me. And so it was, yeah. And I mean, I have been blessed like beyond. And every time I sit down with that group of people, I'm like, wow, I get to sit here with these men and
Some
women.
bright people.
It's amazing. And when it's clicking with those people, it's like, wow, there is just nothing better. So I have been blessed. God has done things through me that I said things through me, spoken into, I think, who we are as an organization, in ways that had I not been obedient, he would have still done it. He would have found the way. But I've gotten to experience the joy and the fruitfulness of it. So that's my story.
Well, Craig and Jason, I'm going to put you on the spot real quick. Can either of you imagine? I'm going to put my eyes away from the camera down to y'all's faces. Can y'all imagine this without Myra in it?
No way.
No way. And are you like, get over yourself, girl? You're amazing. Yeah. So much wisdom. So, yeah, thank you. I know that was a big deal. You did make that very clear to me. And I do remember, I remember even Mitch, as bright as Mitch is, Mitch couldn't understand why I felt like we needed to expand the board. Mm-hmm. But we would not be where we are had we not taken that step. And there's so much that's evolved from that. So that was how he was leading, and I'm grateful. Yeah. All right, Jason, let's turn it to you. Application story.
Yeah. I came to Houston in 2007 to do youth ministry and worship at a downtown congregation, and was there for 6 years. And the relationships that we had with those folks there was they became. I kind of had this phrase that like water is thicker than blood in that season. Let me tell you what I mean with that. Is that the waters of baptism run thicker than blood. So thinking of spiritual family and all that kind of stuff, right? My family, is on the West Coast. My wife's is on the East Coast, and we're here in the middle of the country in Texas. And so, we didn't have anybody else but our spiritual family, if you will. And so we were incredibly close. And God put a vision on our hearts to plant a church. And so we planted a church, and I was doing worship and discipleship, missional communities. Spent another 6 years doing that. Once again, with that same kind of waters thicker than blood kind of relational capital. And boy, we were in it. And so to paint you this picture is that our relational capital. So at this point in almost 2019, we have 12 years of relational capital with our community. I was working there, and these were all of our friends, our volunteer. So what I'm trying to say is like, we were like 5 layers deep with this one community in particular, and still have some very, very dear and closest friends from that community. However, gearing up to 2019, and this is kind of where, for me as a leader, is I was very insecure. I didn't have many necessarily convictions at that point that were my own. And the Lord kind of grabbed a hold of my wife and I's heart at the same time. Um, and so, with the simultaneously, my wife was hearing the voice of Jesus say, "Our time is up with this community." Simultaneously, and I kid you not, I mean, this is all happening like the same morning. Jesus got a hold of me and said, "Jason, your time is up and it's time to move on." Now, I won't go into necessarily the crisis that was that year, but we needed to leave and to depart. And so, what this meant for us as a family is leaving behind 12 years of relational capital, friendships, coworkers, everything. And so, it wasn't too much longer before, well, actually, that same day, I went and drove to my wife's work. She was working at a plant nursery in town, and I showed up and I said, "Babe, it's time. It's time to move on." And she said, "Good." She couldn't believe it because she was thinking that if I wasn't going to leave, she was, and she was dreading that conversation.
That big, yeah.
And so thankfully, Jesus got a hold of both of us simultaneously. And so anyhow, it was a very hard and very difficult season, but I resigned and we left. And so I was unemployed. And then shortly after that, Jesus put on my wife's heart to resign from her job. By this time, we had just put the house on the market. So we're in this season in 2019 where we're both unemployed. We have 3 kids, and our house is on the market. And I heard Jesus say 5 things in that season. You're going to move to Southwest Houston. You're going to go to this church. You're going to eventually lead worship at this church. Your wife's is going to be able to get a job at this church. And your kids are also going to go to school at this church. Now, there's a few other things that happened in this season, but I kid you not, all 5 of those things happened within that year. And so 2019 was a huge year for us. And so we sold our house. We moved to Southwest Houston. We partnered up with this church. After a year, I eventually started leading worship there. My wife was working there, and our kids were going to school there. And then COVID hit, right? And so we were in Southwest Houston for 2 years, and it was definitely a wilderness season for us. And so I had yet to see what Jesus had in store through that call of obedience, because it was very, very painful. And so just looking over these last 5 years now, is that scary act of obedience, leaving behind everything, has led to quotes like my wife telling me, "Jason, you are a different man. You are a leader worth following. The way that you make decisions, the way that you lead people, the way that you love people, the way that the Holy Spirit has healed you from, let's just say, anger and all this other kind of stuff. Like, you are a completely different person." And that is the moment when I had to have some very, very hard and crucial conversations that God used that to create me into the man that he continues to want me to be. And that's led me here, right? Coming on staff at Gloria Dei and getting connected with Disciples Made. And now here I am, once again, another step of obedience, that all of this together in the culmination is getting this, take a little leap of faith. It's incredibly exciting to go kind of almost halftime here at Gloria Dei, halftime with Disciples Made, getting to do the things I can't help but do. And, and I feel inadequate, right, at times. And that's why I'm so thankful to be in this group of people and in this room is because with all of us in the Disciples Made and Fully Alive family, ecosystem, what have you, is that because we all value this obedience is greater than competence and tying that to the word freedom, there's freedom in being a part of this community. You feel it because I know that we're all operating with that value of obedience is greater than competency. And that creates trust and the opportunity to be vulnerable and share things like this today. Right. And all that kind of stuff. And it's just, it's a great thing. And so that was a huge act of obedience that was scary, but led to an immense amount of life transformation and stepping into my masterpiece mission.
Love it. And before we get too far, hats off to Pastor Dan and Beth, your supervisor,
Amen.
for
Love
their choosing to see this as God's plan and not anything more than that, and supporting you going halftime there and letting you really focus in on that masterpiece mission and share. Just very, very grateful for their leadership. Listening to your three stories helps me see some common components. I asked you what your most, powerful or the most, meaningful, I can't remember what the word I used, but application story. And every one of you talked about the obedience call was to an unknown to some degree. That was like walking into the dark. I'm walking into a dark room on purpose because Jesus said to go in there. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but I believe he's good. We talked earlier about how we know he's good. We know he's for us, so we can do this, and it releases a greater capacity. So there's a voluntary submission to an unknown. You walk through that unknown. You come out on the backside, not just with greater capacity, but with a greater faith, because one, he met you in that spot and kept you okay. But he also upgraded who you are, both in character and in calling. And that's just profound, right? That's profound. And I feel just compelled to quickly share. I mentioned that Disciples Made would not exist the way it does apart from this maxim. I'll just quickly share one of mine. And it was, I think it was about 2017. And I had been on staff at Westside Family Church, and it was some of the best years of ministry of my life. It's when all this stuff was created. I really loved the environment there, the team. We had a great staff, et cetera. And from 2009 into 2009, all the way to 17 was just glorious. But I could tell in 2017 that the winds of change were coming in senior leadership. And in a big church like that, when senior leadership changes, a lot of things can change. Staff. And I was actually brought on to that team by the pastor that was going to be stepping down before long. And so I'm asking questions early on, like, what will my next step be? Jesus was prompting those questions. And it really came down to, do I want to stay in a local church? I've been called to be a pastor of a local church for 30 years now. And security's there. I know what I'm doing there. Or do I stay married? It wasn't even, do I start a ministry? Do I stay married to this vision? At the time, it was 50 cities with 50 disciple-making movements in them by 2040. We've changed the language of it, but it's pretty much the same calling. It's pretty much the same very large vision of multiplication of disciple-making. Or do I stay married to that? Because I had hoped that would all happen while at Westside, like in the church and translocal with this. And when it came down, I felt like I had to make a decision between, do I try to stay at Westside? Do I open myself up to going to other churches like Westside where I can have a similar role and do this? What am I married to? Security, or am I married to this vision? And so I prepared, my heart was prepared to have to make that decision when it came down to like the debates about what are we going to be, who's the next leader going to be. I definitely sided on the side of the vision, and that rendered me to be thrust into a spot where Disciples Made was my full-time job. And somehow 6.5, almost 7 years later, we're way different because of that. But that's, again, it's another example of going into the dark. I don't know how this is going to work. Coming out on the other side, it's a very, very different person. That's how this would not be the same, a part of it. So I mentioned in my earlier comments, if we were to interview Jesus and ask him, what are your two most powerful application stories? I mentioned Christmas and, leaving the power and the authority of heaven to come down and to be a vulnerable baby. I would say that the second one would be Easter, right? Choosing to allow his life to be taken in order to give us his resurrection life. I just picture him in the Garden of Gethsemane, awaiting, Judas's little mini army to come and arrest him and take him, put him on trial, etc. As he's waiting in the garden, he's having this little internal debate and asking God, if there's a plan B, man, take this cup from me. I don't want to go into the dark. And then he says that immortal saying that we all have the opportunity of saying when it comes down to choosing between obedience and competence. And it's not my will, but thine. Not my will, but yours. Can you imagine him finally getting to that point? I just wonder how much time lapsed between, will you take this cup from me, and not my will, but thine. Like, we read it as if it happened right away. Like, it's like, this is easy. I can just say this. But it seems to me that there might have been, like, the disciples are asleep. There might have been some time that he struggled with that. And then the resolve, your will, not mine, and to walk into it and submit himself all the way to death, trusting that only a physical resurrection would see his future. And I love the fact that God in these obedience is greater than competence stories. It's usually a miraculous source that makes the new resurrection life happen bigger on the backside. So thank you for sharing those stories. They partner with Jesus' stories so powerfully. Here's a challenge for all of us and an invitation. In between now, the Christmas story of Jesus' application story and the Easter story have 4 months-ish, 5 months, perhaps if you include December. In the comments of this post within the Fully Alive app or on social, Facebook, whatever, LinkedIn, whatever, write in the comments some of the other obedience stories, application stories that you see Jesus made in the Gospels. And then share, how are you going to follow Jesus' example from that story in your own life? And let's just invite each other into this value. It's not just a principle, it's a value to be engaged. And so share what you see Jesus doing, share how you're going to follow his example. And then we're going to come back in April and we're going to hit this value again with another one of these webinars. And we want to bring all of your comments into it and share together how that's happening. We actually, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, we might actually invite extra people to join us and share a couple of these stories based upon what turns up. So last comments, anybody, before we start to sign off here? I know I've blabbled on here the last little bit.
Well, I would just say is that God doesn't lead us towards independence. When we're obedient to him, it doesn't mean that when we come to the end of that, then we're on our own again, right? I mean, there is a series of obedience. He leads us into desperate dependence on him. And as he grows our faith through those experiences, we exercise that muscle and we are ready for more obedience. We're ready with a greater faith that he's armed us with. And it in some ways, the challenges may be harder, but it becomes a little bit easier each time, I think, to say yes to God and his callings.
True.
Yep.
Every time.
I love you brought up that it's a series of obediences. And I think you said that earlier as well, Craig.
You did.
It just reminds me of, and I can't remember the pastor who wrote it, but a long obedience in the same direction. That's what Jesus did. That's what we're called to.
Eugene Peterson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
J to the rock. J to the rock. I don't know. Sorry.
Pray big, obey small. It's absolutely a long direction.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry
Christmas.
Happy Advent.
Yeah, happy Advent. Take advantage of this. Sorry, it's there. Anyway. We do hope that this has been an opportunity for you to approach this Christmas knowing that it was an intentional move into the dark and the unknown that led to the beauty and the power that we get to celebrate around the world every year. And just invite you to do something very, very similar. God bless you guys. And we'll see you in January.